I'm Lawrence Francis, host of Interpreting Wine, welcoming you to the Mosaic of Wine Series 1. Giving my audience of wine lovers, students and professionals from across the world access to some of the most interesting, successful and influential people working in and around the world of wine. Series episodes explore the guest's backstory, covering their foundations, growth and legacy, using Interpreting Wine's Mosaic storytelling model. I would love this episode and this series to be the start of a conversation, so please make sure you're subscribed to Interpreting Wine podcast to be alerted when each series episode goes live. We kick things off today in the company of Malu Lambert, South African critic and writer. Exploring first her experiences between the UK and her native South Africa, we talk writing and winemaking communities in South Africa, changing the international perception of South African wines in writing and podcasting formats, how Malu stays objective in her wine writing, before getting into her approach to narrative journalism, and we close with how she's living and capturing the modern South African wine zeitgeist. Enjoy.
Hi, I'm Malu Lambert. I'm an award-winning wine writer and critic from South Africa. And I found my way into wine through the most noble way possible, through working in restaurants and serving people stories and wine while I was at it. So when I was a youngster around 19, I headed off to the UK to go earn some pounds to go pay for my journalism studies back home. Then while I was doing this, I didn't actually realize I wanted to be a wine journalist. Then I wanted to be a political journalist and go cover stories across the world. But then I found wine. And as I started serving the wines to the people, I learned more and more about the wines. We would have incredible tastings at this restaurant, Asia de Cuba. There was table 17. We would sit at table 17 before every Friday shift, and we would taste new wines, and we would discover all these new stories and new worlds. And I found that incredibly fascinating, that you could discover the history of a place, a family that runs back generations, the soil of a place, the sky of a place, all through a bottle of wine sitting, hundreds and hundreds of kilometers away. So I was really quite fascinated by wine. So when I came back to South Africa, with my money that I saved for my studies, I studied journalism, but I promptly got into the world of wine journalism with Good Taste magazine. I got my first job. As I was walking out of my final exam, they called me. They said, "How did the exam go?" I said, "Really well, actually." They said, "Good. Would you like to be our features writer?" So I was very lucky to immediately get a bridge into the world. And from there, I started upskilling my palate with the WSET program. I've now actually completed my WSET level 4. And yeah, it's been quite the journey. I've won a couple of awards along the way, and that's been great. And I've written a book on South Africa's most famous and revered wine estate, Klein Constantia. That's it in a nutshell, I think.
Yeah, no, that's really cool, and I think where people's entry point into wine, I think is always sort of fascinating. And I know when we spoke before today, you again sort of mentioned Asia to Cuba. And I'm just curious, even sort of, because that sounds like that's really where it all started. Was there a specific moment, you think, or interaction around that time that you can recall that kind of, crystallized your shift and sent you in this new direction?
I'm so glad you asked that question, because it just reminded me of a time that Ewan McGregor, the actor, came to the restaurant for Burns Night, which is a famous poetry evening for Scotland. Anyway, so there he was in his kilt, reading out speeches, poetry, and we were serving Dom Perignon that evening, I think the 1980 vintage. And they weren't actually drinking the wines. They were just kind of popping the wines and then just putting them on the table. And Ewan says to me, "Hey, would you like this?" And he gave me a bottle of Dom Perignon. And I said, "Yeah, oh, sure, thank you." And then I went back to the back of the hotel, and I sat on the back steps of the hotel with a couple of my friends, and we drank straight out the bottle. And it was just one of those moments where, like, wow, wine can really open up the world to you in just ways you never really imagined. Ewan McGregor in a kilt giving me Dom Perignon. I mean, that's a great little anecdote. And there were lots of little moments like that. But really, it was just the discovery of new wines all the time, and how I noticed my palate evolve. I started really liking the kind of oaky Chardonnays from Australia. Petaluma was one of them. These days, I don't think I could drink such an oaky Chardonnay, but it just shows you that wine continues to evolve and change as your palate does, as your experiences with wine do. So does your journey with discovering wine. So yeah, Asia de Cuba was amazing in the way that we were just exposed to so much wine and we were offered the opportunity to taste it all the time. And I think that's really important for people in hospitality to remember. Let your waiters taste the wine. Open something interesting on a Friday. Educate your people on the floor because you're opening up the world to them and to then, your customers, your guests, etc.
I think that's an amazing point as well, and and of course, if you and McGregor is sort of there showing you the way, then you've got to answer the call. But I think that's actually really great advice as well, Malu, because I think it will hopefully just be a little bit of a reminder to some of my listeners. It's like, okay, are you getting those sorts of opportunities if you're working in hospitality? I think it can maybe be a little bit easy or just sort of settle into the day to day and maybe lose sight of why a lot of people or more to say some of the huge benefits that can come from being in hospitality, and maybe just a reminder to people, are you getting those opportunities in the place where 100%. You're working? Yeah. So no, I love it, and even I think there you almost started really I think preempting what I was going to ask about in terms of I think that when the way you look at things change, I think is a famous quote. When you change the way you look at things, then the things that you look at change. And I'm so curious about you having been born and brought up in South Africa, going to the UK and getting bitten by the bug there, but then coming back, I guess, with these new with this new appreciation of what you had there. So yeah, what was that like then? Suddenly, I guess, discovering this world that was all around you and maybe you hadn't appreciated up until that point. That's
a great way to put it. This world that's all around you, because that's exactly how it is. You can't drive very far anywhere in the Cape and not see a vineyard. The vineyards are absolutely everywhere. And actually, when I came back home, I started working at a local wine estate, a Fairview wine estate in Paarl, and I worked behind the counter. And we would call it the spiel that we would give people, taste this wine and it's been in oak for blah, 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 and da. And we would just say this on rote every day. And it occurred to me then, that's not how I want to speak about wine. No one cares. I could see people's faces, glossing over when I started launching into the spiel. Maybe because I wasn't then passionate about the spiel myself anymore. But I do want to know how long it's been in oak. Of course, those technical details are important. But I want to know the story of that wine. I want to know why that person who's pouring me that wine, what the reason is they have recommended it. What's triggered that moment? And it's not how long it's been in oak. That's just a detail, right?
I think it's an interesting point because it's one that I think perhaps bizarrely I've noticed when I've gone and explored kind of the world of coffee. I think that actually if you look at the way that coffee is prepared, there's so much that a barista can do to kind of have their presence felt. The way that they brew, the presentation, They have a lot to say, if you like, about how the coffee tastes and that experience, of course. Whereas I think I agree with you there. When you're in a service environment, the wine is made. You can't change how long it's had in oak there. Your factor, I guess, is just your personality, and I think stories are very much then the way that you can kind of bring in to that environment, and you can, I guess, draw out from the guest and make that experience that much better by sort of bringing in all of what's gone into making that wine.
100%. It just makes it more of a intriguing story for the person, because what are we doing here in the wine industry? We want people to enter the wine industry. We want people to work in the wine industry. We want people to drink wine. We want wine to be engaging. So the way you present the wine needs to be engaging. I mean, it seems quite obvious if you put it like that. But just to go back to your question about having this world all around me, it really is a privilege to live in the heart of a winemaking region. And in some ways, I feel like I never really had a chance to not be in the wine industry, as surrounded as it as I am. And there's so much beauty that comes with it. And there's so much, and as you dig through the layers, it's not just the pretty vineyards and the mountain slopes and all of that. It's really, again, the stories behind it, the people who've built these estates, the work they do for nature conservation and the work they do for the communities they're in is really very inspiring. And it just gives you a deeper understanding of the place I'm from. I'm from the Cape, and it's the Cape winemaking history is absolutely integral to my origin story.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, again, we're obviously in tune now because, again, one of the things I was going to, ask you to kind of, I guess still, fill in the story really. It's all around the industry in South Africa itself, because of course you then came back and you had then, I guess, opportunities to kind of reach out to people, to make friends, to make colleagues, and really kind of, again, I guess, establish yourself within that. So yeah, could you maybe talk about what was it that you thought about your career then, and the kind of the best way to build a career, and then perhaps even then some of the people that I guess helped you in those early days and maybe helped to mentor you or whatever other way that they may have helped you.
Yeah, so it's not an easy story to tell. I'll be honest with you, it's been quite tough, and I've had to put in a lot of work, a lot of work, and that's, I think, the real key to it at the end of the day is do good work, you'll be recognized. There's absolutely no shortcut around that, and you have to consistently do good work. But yeah, so I got started at Good Taste magazine, and Shannon Latimer and Colin Collard were my editors there, and they really helped me kind of find a voice at that point. Because I was fresh out of journalism school, I hadn't really had any writing experience, and before they hired me as their features writer, I was actually interning for them, and this I did for free. And this is a huge conversation, as you know, about interns doing work for free, etc. But I have to say, you got to be strategic about it. I've definitely done work for free, and I've done it for the right people at the right time in my career, and it's helped me enormously. I got hired by Good Taste because they could tell from my track record with them already that I could write, and I was someone that I could work with them. So when I get asked the question, I want to become a writer, how do I become a writer? I'm like, write. There's absolutely no way around it other than going ahead and writing. Whether it's starting your own blog, which is fairly easy to do these days. I'm not a blogger. I've never been a blogger. I've always liked I like the gatekeeper of an editor. But there are avenues, or you can go approach magazines or other websites. There are avenues to pursue. If you really, really are serious and you want to write, then write, and the world will open up to you. So that was my first job, Good Taste magazine, and thanks, guys. And then I moved on to Eat Out. I had a small cameo in the restaurant world, and then I went freelance, and I haven't looked back since. And there've been some amazing supportive people along the way. I will cite Michael Fridgen as one of them, who is South Africa's most respected, awarded, illustrious wine writer and critic. He is an incredible mind. I don't think there's any greater mind on South African wine, but also his international wine knowledge is just incredible. And he really uplifts and supports the industry. I write for him, I taste for him, and he's always been very, very supportive in my career, always that kind of ear that I lean on when I badly need some advice, and he's always there willing to advise me. Then I would say my educational journey has been very, very important because I taste in a lot of top competitions. I taste in competitions around the world. I taste for Decanter. I taste for IWSC. I taste for Concours Mondial. I taste for every top competition in South Africa. I'm a taster for Platter's Wine Guide. So I've really I've cornered that. And that's through upskilling my palate. And that wouldn't have been possible without WSET and the mentorship of Kathy Marston, who brought the diploma to Africa. And I was the first intake of diploma students in Africa in the non-online space. It was always available online, but before she did that, it wasn't. And Kathy's a remarkable woman as well. She travels around the world and around Africa, just upskilling constantly. So without that, it's kind of really augmented my writing skills and my writing reputation. So I have both. I've got the the writing reputation and I've got the tasting skills. And I think together that's quite a powerful combination. And then, of course, I have to mention Jancis Robinson. So I am just hugely, I admire Jancis Robinson so much, like so many, many people. But for me, she's the epitome of a true wine critic. She is so professional, so ethically responsible. And she's also been very supportive of me and my journey. And it was an article I wrote for her website a couple of years back that actually won me the Louis Roederer Mont Blanc Emerging Wine Writer of the Year. Sorry, very long title.
Easy for you to say.
That was, and that was a massive turning point for me in my career where I really started to get international attention. So, yeah, I think I'm done.
No, I love it because, again, I think there's sort of something there for everybody. You know, when I think about that journey, it feels as though it's, it's that old adage, start where you are and use what you have. And as you say, how do you want to become a writer? Start writing, actually start getting some momentum, and I would, guess as well, for writing, it is probably very accessible because these are tools that, most people who are listening to this, will have a phone, will have a laptop, will have an internet connection, and I guess that's about all you need, right? I mean, there are so many free platforms out there. And even I think something maybe even, more helpful, there are these sort of, free writing challenges and, content creators out there. I wonder, if you wouldn't mind, I don't know if that's still a world that you sort of take notice of, but presumably, there would have been less of that sort of support when you were starting out. So I guess in a way there's never been more support for people who want to write.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, my first piece of advice would be just to be brave. Reach out to your hero. I emailed Jancis Robinson. I said, look, I want to write for you. I was brave. I picked up the phone to phone Good Taste magazine. I contacted Michael Fridgen. Be brave. Find the people that you admire and who you align your kind of ethos with and how you see your career going, and try your damnedest to be that person, and just, it's modeling in a way, right? Model your career after somebody you admire and just go for it. So that would be my first piece of advice. Identify who your heroes are, who you most would like to be like, and go for it. And then secondly, yes, definitely enter things, because when you start winning awards, people take notice. Jancis has her Wine Writers Awards every year, and that's for amateurs. So you can enter that as an amateur. Anyone can enter. I would look out for that. And they are 67 Pall Mall has just launched an awards that was just took place this year. I was a finalist in the long form journalism competition, so I'm very proud of that. And that's so now a new remarkable platform for kind of new generation writers to have their say. So definitely look out for awards. There aren't as many as there should be, but they really help just kind of shine the spotlight on your name and open the door.
Yeah, no, I love it. Great advice. And I guess something that I think is really interesting then to maybe contrast, but I think also is going to be, of course, a huge part of your story, because we've traveled with you to the UK. We've caught the wine bug there. We've come back. We've realized all of this beauty that's around us, and as you say, you've taken those steps in the wine world and in the writing world, and being able to, I guess, synthesize that and give that fantastic advice there. I'm curious though, more on the wine side, actually perhaps more on the wine production side, because I guess that, of course, to give you material to write about, to give you, I guess, a community to serve, really, that's been, I guess, a parallel, and again, presumably a personal journey to establish yourself in that world as well.
So it's an incredibly small community here in South Africa. We all know each other, and I'm so grateful for it because, when I'm working, I'm at home by myself in my pajamas, but I get to, go to quite a lot of tastings and events, and then I get to see all my colleagues. So that's kind of, that's just nice as somebody who's working on their own. And then, it's a very active community. There are a lot of tastings. Right now, it's a very busy time. There's a tasting I could go to absolutely every single day. And I have to say, South Africans, we put on a lot of charm and hospitality. There's always amazing food, amazing views, amazing conversation. And then, of course, we get to hear the stories behind the wines. And often, you'll have winemakers pairing up with chefs. I went to a launch last week for Miles Mossop's wines, and that was at Luke Dale Roberts' new restaurant, Salon. And Luke Dale Roberts is one of our most famous chefs, and Miles Mossop, one of our most famous winemakers, and they just collaborated on this launch, and it was just magic. There's so much magic to be woven around here, and I think we do that really, really well. When I'm pursuing a story, I do winery visits. I'm always do in-person interviews. I think that's very, very important. My philosophy is narrative journalism. I want to tell stories. I don't just want to repeat things on rote. So, I go to the vineyard, the winery, whatever it is, and I actually go and get the story and I translate it onto the page. That's how I operate.
Yeah, and I know that one of the things you wanted to talk about today, and I think is a huge passion of yours, is single vineyard wines and single vineyard sites. Is there maybe, again, an insight there, a story, or, again, perhaps even a person or a winemaker that you think, would be an interesting window into why that is so important for you?
So single vineyards have this amazing capacity to tell a story because a lot of them are, quite old as well. So they've been rooted in place for a time, and there's stories that have happened and transferred through that vineyard. So from grower to grower, from grower to winemaker. One that stands out for me, that's always kind of stood out for me, is the Heilkrans wine by Chris Alheit. And Heilkrans is Afrikaans for Weeping Cliff. And the story of this wine, the owners lost their son, and Chris actually made it in tribute to them. And the Weeping Cliff, the emotive story, and the wine itself was so compelling and had this like mountain stream electric kind of acidity that just complemented the whole kind of emotive feeling around it. And I'll never forget that wine because it really kind of triggered something in me where, as a technical taster, sure, I can give a wine 95. I can see that it's a 95 wine. It's got everything it needs to be in balance, etc. But as soon as it starts to ascend 95 is when you can't really describe what makes a wine so compelling. And that's when, it almost sublimes. So the Heilkrans was like that for me. It went out of the technical and into, let's just say the emotional kind of response. So there's one story. Another story, is we have a long history of muscat in this country. Our most famous wine, Vinde Constance, is a natural sweet made from muscat. Our oldest vineyard is the Gefunden vineyard, which dates back to the 1884. I'll have to double check that, but it's somewhere around there, and it's South Africa's oldest vineyard. And drinking this wine, it's so concentrated. It's just got these layers and layers and layers of flavors. It's almost like you're just tunneling down into all that time that's gone past, And then that feeling of just like this rare privilege of being able to taste this wine, that makes it even more special. And that's what South Africa has in spades, these really, really special stories buried in these wines. And when you taste these wines and you understand the vineyard and you've heard the story, it really is quite like a 3D experience for your brain, right?
Yeah, it's, I think, again, as many touch points, as many senses that we can stimulate all at once, really. I think it helps us to remember, right? And it helps us to kind of lock in the emotion behind an experience. And I think that's, for me, that's one of the great joys of wine and winemaking, is that, you've got, again, from my personal experience, I found that I absolutely love winemakers, and I find that they're, the most sort of rooted people, and, just love being on the land, and, love having their feet in the soil. But they're making this incredible product that can be shipped all around the world, and, can be enjoyed at a completely different time in a completely different setting. But again, when well looked after, when made well, it absolutely, captures something really unique about them, about the site, about the time, and it can, go on and sort of spread that message out into the world. I think it's, just an incredible, incredible industry, really.
No, I agree with you. I mean, there's no other industry in the world that encapsulates science, language, history, family, passion, geology. It takes every subject in the world and it condenses it into, a liquid form. And that's why I truly love wine. Studying WCT, you delve into like Germanic wine lore, which is a terrifying place. But I love that, exposed to language like that. And it's absolutely, as I said, it encapsulates the world. And, not all of us can travel widely all the time, but a lot of us can afford a really good bottle of wine and, travel to the place through that bottle of wine. So be curious. I say, be curious.
Yeah, no, I love it. And I think, again, I'll own this, and you can sort of respond as you wish. But I have a very deep instinct, I would say, and I think that's been borne out by tastings that I've gone to in the UK. That we don't necessarily have a full appreciation of South Africa culture. I think number one, I'm talking about the UK here. South African culture, and I would say even more, vividly, South African wine. It's my instinct that we underappreciate it. That we're maybe, still influenced from a time when the messaging wasn't about the type of single vineyard wines that you're talking about there, Malu. When it was about maybe more cheap and cheerful, when it was more about kind of volume. And I just wonder, through your writing, I think an interesting thing that has again come up is that you are a South African specialist, but then you've got those I guess now working in collaborative partners and people you write for who are international, and you'll be writing for an international audience. So I guess taking all of that, again, what are maybe your feeling on how you write and how you adapt your message for those different markets, taking account of everyone is, I guess, starting from a different point in terms of their appreciation of just how good South African wine can be.
So, first of all, I'd like to say that I just kind of get sick of the old stories. It's a problem throughout the wine world. People, there's a famous story, and then that's the reputation of that wine region hinges on that story. And it's just we need to be a little bit more, again, curious about the wine regions around the world if we are truly in love with wine. I mean, the perfect example is Pinotage. I get so sick of the story about tar and burned rubber. And then the person who's saying that about Pinotage thinks they're very clever because now they've been able to dismiss something. And just because you're putting something down doesn't make you smart. It's actually, it's a lot harder and you're a lot smarter often when you're positive about something because you're actually looking at progression rather than just hinging on these old stories of the past. So, I mean, this story about the Pinotage and the rubber and the tar, this goes back to the 70s. I mean, it's 2024 and I get to drink a lot of Pinotage, and, Pinotage kind of goes the whole spectrum from the new wave, red fruited kind of lighter styles to the more oaky, fuller bodied traditional styles. And they're good. I haven't smelled tar ever. Just going to put that out there. So first of all, I would like to say that let's tell news stories, and let's be aware of our own bias. Immediately you want to go tar when you hear Pinotage, that's bias, and investigate that for yourself. Go out there and be curious and go drink some Pinotage and tell me if you really taste in tar. So that would be my first thing. Let's go forth and be brave and tell new stories and hear new stories and investigate. Then, I was in the UK twice this year, and I tend to agree with you. The nuance of South African wine is lost. I mean, I know it's our most important market, and I know we have very passionate writers there, importers, etc. But the message is getting lost. I think it's really centered around fine wine, and that's great. But there are levels of fine wine. I would like to walk into, an off license in the UK and be able to buy a really, really good Chenin Blanc with a story behind it at a good price, because Chenin Blanc we have. We got a lot of Chenin Blanc. But you don't find that. What you find is shelves full of Chilean Merlot or, Tall Horse Sauvignon Blanc from South Africa, which I've never seen in South Africa. It's bulk wine that's been shipped over and bottled or whatever. Those stories are getting lost slightly to the more general population. And I know that I can't afford to spend £20 on a bottle of wine per night. I think, my area is more around £9 or even £5. I don't know. And that's most people. So I think the marketing directive needs to change slightly, and it would be great to see top quality South African wines on more accessible shelves. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and it's again, me never having been to South Africa, I'm also just curious. Then again, in whatever you've kind of already started to talk about it there, but do you just, as you say, when you go to the UK and then you see our offer, in whatever stores that you go to, and then you come back home, what is the sort of contrast? Is it just that, wow, we've got so much more to say over here in South Africa that and as you say, at an accessible price, and they just don't have that insight there, or is it kind of something else?
Well, the contrast is massive. You can come back home and you can walk into any shop and find really amazing South African wines at really good prices. I mean, that being said, I don't want to discount South African wine. I don't think it should be too cheap, because that ruins its image too, and it's actually not fair to the grower and the winemaker, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the fact is, there is variety, there is nuance. There's nuance in regionality we're not seeing when you go to the UK. And I think that's really important. South Africa, we're almost seen as like this blanket term of South Africa. But there are 9 provinces in South Africa, and only one place makes wine, kind of. There are some outlying areas. But generally, the Western Cape is where we make wine. And within the Western Cape, we've got so many regions, so many subwards, so many special little slices that just aren't kind of being recognized and celebrated, because the wines are really different in the Himmel and Aarde than they are in Stellenbosch. And that kind of needs to be celebrated. And I think we're doing our consumers across the pond a disservice by not introducing them to these stylistic nuances. I mean, it's so exciting. That's the thing. There is so much to discover about South African wine, rather than just hinging on kind of old stories.
Okay, let's. This seems like again, something that I know that you're very passionate about, but I think it feels like an interesting point to again build on your work, what you're doing and what you're kind of getting commissioned for. So in a way, is it or are you able to find ways to kind of again elaborate and talk about the complexity of those 9 provinces when you're telling those wine stories to those international audiences who, again, might have a gap, really, let's say, in their understanding?
I mean, the first problem is, the thirst for South African wine stories is not that massive. And that, I mean, that's what you need to kind of face down first. So I do get some really nice commissions where I get to talk about wines. I mean, I've just finished something for Decanter on white blends, my top white blends. And this is another such interesting South African category, because they're generally Chenin based, which is kind of like our superpower. And you can't get wines like this anywhere in the world. And it's so great to bring that story to a world audience, which is the Decanter audience. But as I said, the opportunities aren't as thick as they could be, or as I'd like them to be. But yeah, I do have some little plans in the way to bring stories to the world. I mean, it is my mission. I've said from the get-go, I love South Africa. I write for publications here, and that's great. But I don't want to talk in an echo chamber. I want to bring stories to the global audience. So that's been my mission. And so I've got a little secret project in the works, which I can't talk about now. But that's very much about bringing those kinds of stories, the stories I want to tell, to the world at large, to the States, to the UK. So wish me luck.
Okay, and I'll preview now. We're going to be sharing your social media handle and your contact details later on, and it'll be in the show notes. So make sure you follow along to get news on that top secret for the moment project. And I love being able to talk like this, and I think that again, I think it's worth mentioning what I do really, and where I see, I think, so much opportunity for regions to kind of turn the tide, which is really through what we're doing now, through audio, through podcasts, because I think it takes time, and again, your commissions, they're, doing great work. They're putting the word out there for South African wine. I think for me, one of the, really interesting things is that the level of English and the ability to communicate in English is so important for any region, and I think that's where actually somewhere like South Africa, because everyone has got, this incredible level of English, and most people English is not their first language, which I regularly forget. It's such a, I would say, when you look at the world of wine, you look at the Italys and the Frances and the Spains, the Portugals, oftentimes, you've got that advantage, and it would translate into something like podcasting. So I'm just curious, is that something that you see developing, wine podcasting on the ground, getting those stories out in that really long format from the winemaker, from the region out into the world? Yeah, just your thoughts.
Well, I've never thought about it that way before, about the English language, and that actually, it's actually quite a powerful marketing tool. You're right. There are some people who are very Afrikaans and just can't speak English at all, but they are few and far between. That's very powerful. And Iverson now kind of inspired me to think about, if I'm going to interview a winemaker or I'm going to go get a story, I should probably record it. I think in some ways South Africa is a little bit more behind in terms of podcasting and things like that. It takes a while for us to catch up sometimes. But yeah, I think there's some really interesting opportunities there.
Yeah. And, again, just to say, it just takes time, and anything for perceptions to change, that let's be honest, they took time to build up in the first place. For a lot of people, you're not always starting at zero. As you say with Pinotage, they've heard these descriptors, and they've heard this is how Pinotage tastes. They've heard that repeatedly, and it's like, okay, now we've got to get into, okay, we don't necessarily want to, kick the old messages down, but we can replace them. I think, again, building something, being positive. I think it's about, let's just talk about, I guess, again, we're in the Pinotage or in the Chenin Blanc category. It's like, just, how good can they be? What are the producers doing there? How beautiful are the places where the wine is being made? Really paint that picture, because again, I'm not sure that I really, fully appreciate just how beautiful South Africa is.
Well, the amazing thing about, I'm going to talk about the Western Cape. The most amazing thing about the Western Cape is how close to proximity everything is. So, I mean, right now where I am, I'm on the Cape Peninsula, and I've got a vineyard over there, I've got the mountain over there, I've got the ocean over there, I've got the forest over there, and they're all like they're all close. And that's you can drive a couple of hours here and you can see so much, and it's all so beautiful. I was in Bordeaux last year, also a very beautiful place. But man, we drove and we drove and we drove. It was so big and so intimidating, and not that mountainous.
Yeah,
they're also proud of their little like hills, Because we've got mountains here. Let me tell you, we've got the most incredible mountains. You drive into the Breda Cliff, and it's like going into Lord of the Rings. These mountains just rise up, imposing on all sides, and then there's just pockets of viticulture and waterfalls, and it is incredibly beautiful and very accessible.
Yeah.
You can just jump in a car, you can hire a car, you can hire a shuttle, you can hire whatever. It's just also very, very, very accessible. All from where I am on the Cape Peninsula, all the major wine regions, other than Constantia, which is on my doorstep, all the other main regions are an hour away. 1 hour. Easy.
Driving.
So, driving, yeah.
That's easy.
It's nothing.
Right? That's literally right there.
we're really very spoilt. And then, South Africans, we really believe in hospitality. And so our cellar door is just, always a really great, well, not always, but often an incredible experience. We do beautiful wine tastings, restaurants. There's always, we open our doors. Whereas, I was in the south of France once, and I'm coming with the South African mentality of like, there's going to be a tasting room open. It's going to be beautifully appointed. There's going to be amazing food. That wasn't the case. I had to knock on like garage doors to try and taste wine. But that was in its own way really fun,
Yeah. Yeah.
But that being said, when we have visitors that come to South Africa and they experience the cellar door hospitality that we have, which I think is probably the best in the world, they will take that feeling back home, and then they'll see that bottle of wine that they enjoyed on the terrace overlooking the dam with the eagles flying about and, all this beauty. And they will love that wine for the rest of their life. So I really do encourage people to come visit South Africa, because that's a great way to spread our story and really to embed ourselves in the hearts of the wine world. Did I answer your question there?
No, we're absolutely we're completely in kind of unison, let's say, because I thought this was going to be a great opportunity to talk about just that, and again, this is really just based on what you're seeing, and I thought as well maybe writing, might also and potentially commissions, that might be an interesting way, because my read is that actually, well, one, tourism is just is booming, is in a growth phase in many countries around the world. That on the back of that, wine tourism itself is also growing. And then I think, as you said there, actually to a wine region, even to wines of South Africa, or to just look at it on the wine economics, having someone visit your country and have that, as you say, that kind of local experience, and just, kind of just fall in love with the place, even beyond wine. I think actually then when they come back home, that the wine is there waiting for them, isn't it? If we're talking about the UK, they've got a way to sort of, relive and re-engage with their holiday and their experiences when they're back home, and, an easy path to do that. So yeah, just in a nutshell though, is that sort of, something that you see South Africa doing quite well at the moment, again, being able to attract wine lovers and sort of, put that signpost and that marker out there that, we really want you to come and visit us.
Absolutely. And whenever I speak to people that have visited South Africa, they always have this like surprise. They're like, that was just the most incredible place. Like, wow. And I just felt such pride when I was off to the UK earlier this year. And it was on Virgin Airways or something, and there were just a lot of Brits around me. So I was just eavesdropping on their conversations. And I'm like, how incredible is this place? And we visited this wine estate and da-da-da. And everyone's just like gushing about their visit. And it made me feel incredibly proud. And I was also like, well, what's not to love? I mean, first of all, it's 23 Rand to the pound. So you come here and you live like a king on the pound. I mean, it's an 8-hour flight. You're currency rich. And it's hospitality on a platter, and beautiful vistas, and just, it's a no-brainer to come to South Africa. And I really think, as much as I want to bring South African wine to the world, I would love more of the world to come to us and experience just how special it is what we have. And then just on the last point of people going, back home after they visited us, the wines are there. When I talk about, going to the off license or the supermarkets and not being able to find wines that I want, it doesn't mean the wines aren't there. There's some very passionate importers of South African wines. I mean, Hanford wines, Rack, museum wines. There's tons of them. Just kind of seek them out. I mean, a quick Google search will do it, because the wines are there. You just have to be curious and go and get them.
Yeah. I love it. And, again, I, picked up on that in our conversation before recording, again, your passion and, your desire to be an advocate really for South Africa, for South African wine. But I think, it would also just be interesting, again, as we kind of move through the conversation and just, thinking about maybe, what might be some of the challenges that you've potentially overcome or obstacles. And something that's just, really, really curious. I'm really curious about it is, how do you stay kind of objective, about South Africa, about South African wine, while of course also being an advocate and being hugely knowledgeable. How do you sort of I guess reconcile those and just make sure that you are at least presenting a balanced view?
So that's an interesting question, because of course we all have our leanings towards things we like. I mean, there's just no way of getting around that. And I will generally write about things I find interesting and things I like. And I think that's okay, because I think people follow me for that very reason. They like the wines I like. They like the stories I'm telling. That being said, it is I'm a trained journalist, so it's very important to me that I present a balanced view. So when I'm doing, a roundup of wines, I will make sure there's a diversity of styles, first of all, of that wine. Second of all, I'll make sure there's a diversity of, say, bigger estates versus more smaller estates versus own label producers, because that's just so interesting. It's not only about being, ethically correct. It's also about, what does the reader want to know? They want to know about that Garage East wine label, but then I can't leave out the big estate who's been making this wine forever and doing it very well. So that's also an important part of the story. So I approach it with my journalism skills, my inherent journalism skills, and then, in terms of rating wines, then I'll fall back on quality. And that's how I taste the wine. I always taste it on quality. People have stylistic leanings, and, a certain palate might like really kind of acidic, kind of linear wines. Another palate might like a bit more fatty wine or whatever. You have to take that out of the equation, and you just have to rely on quality. Is this quality in the glass? Does it have balance, length, intensity, and complexity? If you wanted to pick it, you've got to just fall back on that training. So I fall back on my training as a journalist. I fall back on my training with WSET. So yeah, I find that quite easy to do, because then you can get rid of the noise and just concentrate on the intrinsics of what's in front of you.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting. It's I guess talking again to that foundation that you've got, and then, again, that rigor and what you've taken the time and the money and the stresses to make sure that you're standing on firm ground, which I think is important.
I think that's very important. I think, just advice to anybody wanting to get into the wine world in terms of tasting and writing, just make sure you've got the skills to back it up. Upskill yourself and you can do anything. And also give you the confidence to speak in intimidating situations, to speak your mind in intimidating situations, to put your opinion forward. It'll give you the confidence if you have that background and the training.
I love it. And something that I think, again, really, really stood out, and you've already mentioned it today, Malu, is around narrative journalism. So again, I think this is arguably building perfectly on that, because to me, it's kind of talking about, okay, you've got the rigor, you've got the underpinning, but then you're maybe, that gives you the liberty to maybe potentially be more creative or approach and research really the story in a quite a different way. And you've mentioned that you live the story before writing it. And I think this is, again, a great example where, maybe talking to, something practical and something that you've actually perhaps is already out there in the public domain where we can go and read, but you could maybe, fill us in a little bit on the process behind that.
So, I think my writing does have a little bit of a poetic leaning. So I think anything, that I've written, you can go have a look at. And if you follow me on social media, I've got some links up on my Instagram, etc. And again, as you say, I can take some flights of fancy because I've got the knowledge to back it up. I've got the groundwork there, so I can kind of spin things. The creative process, gosh, I really just want to write what I want to write. And I'll often hook onto something that somebody said or some little pearl in the story and spin that out more to make that the focus. And that's only something that I can do from my perspective. And that's what makes writing so interesting, and different voices and opinions so interesting, because that'll appeal to me and then I'll spin it out, whereas maybe somebody else can't do that. And, this is why I'm not worried about, things like AI journalism, because AI can't write narrative journalism. You can't. AI can't live the story. So
Hmm.
people always ask me, do you think AI is coming for your job? I absolutely 100% don't. And I've tried, I've said, write a paragraph on Chenin Blanc in the style of Malu Lambert. And it was really cheesy. Like, I know I lean towards the poetic sometimes, but this was just beyond. I said, well, you see, you're not nailing it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And also just enjoy yourself. Find the joy. I think that's very important. Sometimes I'll be sitting writing my 500th tasting note for platters, and it can come like quite a slog. And then I'll remind myself, you're doing this because you love it. And you actually love writing tasting notes. You love tasting wine. So when it becomes a slog or when it starts to feel like work, just remind yourself to find the joy in what you're doing and just, work joyfully. And I found that really helps me and changes the way and changes my creative process if I just approach it with joy.
Amazing. And I'm sure everyone else that's listening is as fired up as I am, and as enthusiastic as you obviously are. I think about South Africa, about visiting South Africa, about trying the wines. And again, for most of the people listening, you'll have access. So we're hopefully, planting those seeds about giving maybe South African wines a chance, and maybe, as you say, seeking out maybe some of those more maybe boutique, let's say, maybe labors of love, or those more interesting narrative behind some of those wines as well. And then really, as we kind of look towards closing, I think one of the things that I'm really keen to draw out is really, I guess, the big purpose, and the lasting impact I think that my guests want to make in the world. And I think listening to this point, I think we'd be under no illusion that obviously bringing the stories of South African wine to the world, doing so in a credible way as well, in a way that isn't sensationalist, but I think that
Yes.
Again gives a real, genuine, and modern insight into what's happening in South Africa. That's what I've sort of really taken from our conversation, and maybe again perhaps expand a little bit on that. What you think is I guess you see as your purpose, and I guess the game that you can see yourself playing for the next 5-10 years.
Gosh, I think you put that so well. Thank you. I need to actually write that down and just tell everybody that's what I'm doing.
Just written your bio, yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I'm gonna take that one. Yes, as you said, I'm just incredibly passionate about South Africa because this is my home, and I'm proud of it, and I'm proud of the work we've done in the wine industry. I also know that I'm part of a very special moment in South African wine. Like, this is the South African wine zeitgeist. In 20 years' time, we're going to look back and go, whoa, those were the times when we were just making such huge leaps in terms of quality, in terms of world recognition. Like, this is the moment. You can actually feel it. It's like it has this amazing energy and electricity around what's happening in South African wine. It's exciting. And I'm excited to be a part of that, to have that be a part of my story, of my life story, the fact that I was part of this zeitgeist in South African wine. And I want to write those modern, which you correctly said, stories. We need to move on from these old stories, the old messaging, and put new messaging out there. And I want to be a driver for that. And I hopefully am being a driver for that, and will continue to be a driver for that. What I see in the next 5 years, 10 years, I'm not sure. I have some secret projects, as you know, and I think I'm going to continue to do what I do and put my best foot forward for South Africa. Find interesting stories, tell the stories, and enjoy a nice glass of wine at the end of the day.
Yeah, it's a great summary, I think, and it feels as though you're very much on the right path. It feels as though you've built proper foundations, under what you're doing. And there's that saying, isn't there, about if you want to build high, then you've got to dig deep beforehand. So I love it. I love it. And then, yeah, really, I think, Malu, just in closing, I'd love to just offer you the opportunity to, let the listeners know, potentially two things. Like, one, where can they find you online? But then also, what maybe, you think some of the things that people can do to, help you in your mission, and get involved.
So you can find me on social media. It's my name, Malu Lambert Malu Lambert at Instagram or Twitter. I would say that if you want to learn more, you're welcome to message me. I'm more than happy to talk to you and to give you advice. I would love that. I'm an ambassador for South African wine, and I've got to put this knowledge somewhere sometimes. And then in the works, I'm currently working on a book on Chenin Blanc, which I'm very excited about. It'll be the definitive book on Chenin Blanc. We have the world's most planted Chenin, as I said, in the world. And the stories that follow the Chenin is very, very interesting. So hopefully that is kind of in the works now. Also a single vineyard book I'm working on the side, and all my usual articles and tasting, etc. So yeah, if you want to know more, just get in touch or go visit my social media. All my stories are up there.
A huge thanks to today's guest, Malu Lambert, award-winning South African wine writer and critic. Visit her on Instagram at Malu Lambert, link below, where you can of course learn more and follow along her journey. And why not reach out to her to let her know what you thought of the episode and ask any questions the episode raised. Next time on Interpreting Wine's Mosaic of Wine Series 1 in episode 565, I'll be speaking with returning Interpreting Wine guest and organizer of the recent 67 Pall Mall Global Wine Communicator Awards, Richard Hemming, MW. Subscribe to the podcast and you'll be alerted when that episode goes live. See you then.